All right, everybody. Captain John here with Drew Faulkner, and we are kicking off season 4, episode 1, after about a 6-month hiatus, 8-month hiatus, and we're nearing riding season. Some of us have already been out riding a good bit, but anyways, we got some stuff we want to talk about that's been in the news, and it's almost been like a fire hose of new stuff coming down the pipe, so to speak,
Yeah.
of two big main motorcycle manufacturers, one in more of the street world and one in more of the dirt world. But before we dive into that, Drew, last time I saw you, you were on our podcast last year, and I saw you at your rally, at your Red River Scramble. And that was right during the hurricane that destroyed North Tennessee, Western North Carolina, and a lot of Kentucky, and and I just want to know your thoughts on that. I've got thoughts I want to share, but I mean, it was quite the experience to be riding during a hurricane.
I can man, I can pontificate about a lot of things. I actually used to do a fall rally down at Deals Gap, and it was one of the reasons I got tired of going because it seemed like every time I went down there in September, a hurricane would come. So we kind of never expected that in Kentucky, as it turned out. But yeah, the to me the photographs don't even do it justice. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen videos of guys crawling around trees and moving bikes out of the way and cars coming around the corner and actually plowing into the tree because they didn't see it in the curve. And yeah, it was hairy.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll tell you about, so anyways, a week or two before, another hurricane had moved through Tennessee up through
Mm.
Kentucky, and we've been talking, the forecasts were like 6 inches of rain through middle part of Tennessee where I'm at, and it blew through. We didn't have the first drop of rain. It was just some wind, and so when they were talking about this next hurricane, similar pathway, of course it
Mhm.
changed a little bit. I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking optimistic. I grew up in Alabama, spent a lot of time on the coast. Hurricane parties were a thing. We didn't
Yeah.
really, it was like no big deal. Hurricane, yes, hurricane season. And so cell service, as you know, obviously is pretty spotty up there. So it was hard to be able to download the
Mhm.
maps. So I remember looking up that morning and I saw a little glimpse of blue sky in between the clouds. And I was like, oh, it'll be okay. Let's go out riding. And as soon as we got on the road, branches were hitting me in the face coming out of the trees. And as soon as we get off trail, it turns from bad to worse, and the creeks were flooding.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
you saw we're like, and so after we got denied on some of the roads,
Oh yeah.
and Dave split off at that point because we had been out. He split off because he had lost um, his shifter. His
Oh
shifter
yeah.
fell off. He lost it, so he was stuck in fourth gear. So we had to like push him off, and he had to ride
Yeah.
fourth gear back. So me and this other guy that we met up with, a local guy in Kentucky,
Mm.
went, and we'd already crossed about, maybe 20, 30 trees already.
Oh yeah.
And I don't use, I'm not exaggerating. I really feel like we had to go around, over and under about 100 downed trees.
Uh,
Easy,
I mean,
easy.
it was wild because that was the thing, right? Is that the further you went, you might have to go over a tree. But the catch is, if you double back, there could be more trees behind you than there were when you actually went into the woods. It was wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're out there, and I mean, people are thinking we're crazy. We're out there riding. This one group, two guys in a truck, and they were chainsawing some trees. They said, "Are y'all search and rescue?" And we're like, and we laughed. We said, "No, we're just out riding." And they just shook their heads.
But I mean, you nailed it because that's the thing, right? Like early in the week, they had kind of forecast a hurricane. I'm like, look, I have seen so many hurricanes get totally stopped in their tracks by Tennessee. I'm not going to sweat it. We're going to get some rain. It's going to suck. That is not how it played out at all. I've never seen a forecast that accurate. I've never seen, I mean, that hurricane went from landfall to Eastern Kentucky in like 24 hours. It was bonkers.
Yes, yes, and so had no idea how bad North Carolina and
Yeah.
northeastern Tennessee was getting hit. I mean, it was bad there, but it was nothing like
Oh,
a couple hundred miles away. It was
agreed.
it was mass flooding. So we all know what happened afterwards, but that was the most unique event riding in that. I mean, it was just trying to get back. It was wild. And I'll tell you, so, I mean, I've only ridden up there. I mean, I've spent time vacation up there, but
Sure.
not really on I've never been on your tracks. And so I
Yeah.
remember we're on this one gnarly track. And we come out into this unimproved dirt road, and there's some rundown shacks. And we come up and on a EMS truck,
Oh,
back
yeah.
there, like trying to get somebody out of their house. I guess they had a heart attack or
Oh,
something.
my
I was like,
God.
they're
Yeah.
way out in there, and they're looking at us like, "What are y'all doing?" And we're like, do you know how that road is down there?" I'm like, and the guy's shaking his head. He's like, "I've never been down there in my entire life." I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, it was just a very surreal experience with all this going on.
I saw photos of you guys crossing Walker Creek. Now, when I say that to a lot of people, they think I mean the road. I'm like, no, you guys were crossing the creek. And I'm like, I've not personally been across Walker Creek in many years. I found a closer bypass that's lower. That's actually on the GPX tracks I use now. But yeah, some people still get the old ones. And I saw those photos of you guys cross that. I'm like, yeah, that's no joke.
No, it was sketchy. So we had to walk it, and it was if you went across it, there was a deep hole. You would have
Yep.
been sunk. I mean, it'd been over the seat. And
Yeah.
so, of course, you saw the line that we took.
Yep.
Well, they walked it, and it was getting deep. So it was like, and at that point, we knew it was just going to get worse. It was like we're not going to be able to go back because
Right.
that was the beginning of the day. It's like we're just got to keep going. You know.
Yeah. They were epic photos, sir. Thank you.
Oh, well, it was an epic rally. It was a good time. So I'll be back this fall.
That's to me, that's actually the most outstanding thing is when I got the survey responses back, I was impressed because obviously it cut down attendance pretty significantly. We had
Yeah.
record registration, but obviously people at the last minute are like, yeah, I don't know about this. But the number of first timers that filled out the survey, it was almost 50%. And a whole bunch of them were like, oh my God, this is the best. Like I've never had so much fun before. I'm like, wow, we have quite the association of motorcycle masochists, apparently.
Yeah. Well, that's that. I mean, the struggle makes for good memories.
Yeah, true story. No, that's exactly right.
So, so anyway, so we're going to talk about the fire hose. It's like there's so much news coming out.
Mhm.
Every other day, new articles, new revelations, more so on the KTM debacle. But of course, Harley Davidson's been in the news as well. They're maybe not as in dire straits yet. KTM, it's like, the latest is, yes, they reached a debt agreement,
Mhm.
but they have a huge, massive chunk of change and like hundreds of millions. I forget the exact number that they have to repay by a certain date. And if they don't have the capital to do that, um, then they're done. And
Yeah,
so you know, there's been the reports that BMW is possibly interested in purchasing them. So now it's not an Austrian company, it's a German company. That would be best case scenario. Then there's, I don't know how you pronounce it, Bajaj.
yeah,
Yeah, the India company
yep,
and that's so convoluted. Like they own a majority in one, and then Peerage AG and KTM AG own majority, it's back and forth. Like it's very convoluted, but they could become um, owners
yeah.
of it, or CF Moto or another Chinese company.
It is particularly wild for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not
So
sure how you
that's
go ahead.
no, I was just saying that's of course we both. I mean, we're more on the dirt side of things, but I do ride a lot of street. But that's really been that's the most dire thing, and and I think everybody's been seeing this kind of come. But the other is this is Harley Davidson is just really. the crapper, the Puma salesman,
I have a
sneaker
I have a few
salesman
words.
turned Harley CEO,
Yeah.
has done some apparently some smoke and mirrors on the and had some short-term gains that I think are going to cost them some long-term. So I really wanted to hear your thoughts. We can start with KTM. We can start with Harley, wherever you want to start with that.
Well, I'm going to qualify me a little bit first, if that's fair. If any listeners didn't catch the previous episode, I just sold my KTM 350 probably since the last time we talked. So I sold it this spring,
Okay.
or I guess technically last spring, and I bought a T7. Um, and I have a Sportster in my garage right now, right? So it's like I like KTM and I like Harley Davidson. I'm
Yeah.
probably going to say some harsh things about them.
Well,
You could say it's
I'm a
because I
former
care.
KTM owner.
Yeah,
I have, I like their bikes. I really like not the LC8C, because we
Mhm.
can talk about those problems, but the V twin, the
Yeah.
LC8. Um, I'm a big fan of that motor, but that's a tried and true platform right there.
Yeah, yeah, I think that the original LCA V twin has lots of stuff, but
Yeah.
I do want to set the stage for Harley a little bit. I think partially because the KTM has really led in the news a lot lately. Like at this
Yeah.
point, I think some people think what it is, and I think lots of us have more time to talk about it. I actually think Harley Davidson, agreed, not same dire straits, but I think there's some context.
Mm.
Um, I took some notes because I've actually been debating an article for this and I've written a couple others about it. So Matt Levatich took over the company as CEO in May of 2015.
Yes.
And then he resigned for lack of a better term or retired, whatever you want to call it, in February 2020. And then Josen Zeitz, the current CEO, was interim until April. So April 2020, he was announced as the new CEO. Um, to me, I've looked at things like the stock price, and I found that to be really interesting that compared to the stock market, so the stock price was $57 in May of 2015 when when Matt Levatich took over. This is the 5 year that you got on the screen right
Yeah.
there, but it'll make more sense in a minute. And then it was down to $26. So they lost 54% of stock value in the time that Matt Levatich joined to when they made him retire. What's interesting is the market gained about 40% in that time frame. What I find more interesting now actually is that the stock price when Josen Sites was officially announced in 2021 was about $21, and today it's right around $24. So they've gained 14% stock value. But when you look at the rest of the market has almost doubled in that same time frame. So we're looking at the Dow Jones Industrial on here. If you compare to the S&P 500, which is even wilder, it's gained over 1.3. It's 130% more. So I find it interesting that they did lose a lot of value during the time that Matt Levatich was there, and it was somewhat sudden. And they were ahead of the market most of the time, which is some of the stuff you can see in that chart. But since Josen Seitz took over, they've not really beat the market all that much, and they're not keeping up with the market at all, and they're
No.
not talking about that at all. I don't understand how the board fired the last guy, but this guy gets to stay. I don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I've been thinking about this last couple of days because I knew I was going to meet with you, and so my
Hmm.
expertise is none other than just a rider, an enthusiast. But I'm old. I'm 50 years old this year, so I have seen the trends come and go. So I can make an anecdotal response. I don't think it's ridiculous, and I think. And so Levitich, it was many roads to Harley, right?
Right.
That was his thing. And to me, that's more of a this is going to take some time.
Hmm.
And they had some great things that came. Obviously the Pan America was one. I think that was they wanted that axe. I think it was just
Yeah.
already, from what I've heard on the inside, is it was already ready to be, sold when Zeitz came in. But you know, I think it probably long term, if they'd kept him, it would have paid off because the market is changing, right?
Yeah.
And the adventure market's a huge segment, but I think the problem is there was talks and then they shut up. And I
Hmm.
won't mention names, but we had some. Harley for two of our rallies were our sponsors, and I was going to have one of the employees come on the podcast and talk about. He's like, I can't talk about it now, but in about 6 months, I'm going to come on and talk about the lighter weight adventure Pan Am
Right.
coming out that we all wanted, right? Because the middleweight adventure bike segment is huge, and
Yeah.
of course that just nothing, no talk about it, never brought up again to me. So obviously this was a conversation going on, but the trends is, with what I see from Zeitz is how can we maximize the profit on the short end? And there's a lot of, and we don't have to get into the specifics. I mean, it's all documented, and it's a popular little thing that companies
Yeah.
do. But, it's like, you know, you're really, they're kind of pigeonholing them back into the same position they were in before, which is
Yeah.
aging older riders on overpriced cruisers, which now these overpriced cruisers have become an ultra luxury item because there's
Hmm.
not even an entry. I mean, an entry is now over 10 grand. I mean, we can talk
Yep.
about comparisons. Heck, you can go out and get a Versus X300 Kawasaki for, $5,000 out the door just about, and not that that's a flagship, but, it gets people into riding. And, but you know it's even BMW has entry level bikes.
That was a point I was planning on making. It
Okay.
it's funny because I think Levitich was an enthusiast, right?
Yes.
Because he was like he was the ops president, and he worked. I mean, he's been working there. I think it was since like 2008 or something like that before he actually got into being CEO. But he worked up from lower portions of the company, and then they brought in this new guy who's the business guy, and it's slash and cut like you said, and we could make an argument that he was trying to position the company for purchase, and that never played out. And that was my point about all the stock stuff, was like
Yeah.
they lost value and they axed this other guy who was an enthusiast, and then they brought in this new dude, and he's really not performing all that well overall, and they don't seem to be talking about that. It's also interesting, and I'm pivoting slightly, when you compare the other orange and black brand, uh, the guy being an enthusiast, borrowing money like crazy, and investing in everything is what built KTM to what it was, but there was
Yes.
nobody there to rein him in. And the opposite is what happened to Harley Davidson. Is the enthusiast was like, well, he waited too long. He's like, okay, we're gonna have to embrace everything. And
Yeah.
as soon as he started to do that, the board was like, we don't have finances for that. No, just shut the door on it. And I'm like, but they're not improving at this point,
Yeah.
financially speaking, and that's what's mind-blowing to me. And I love your point about BMW. That's what I was going to say, is I Harley, Zeitz and the board, and they're like, well, we're just going to become this niche premium
Ultra
brand.
premium.
Yes, we're just going to do that. And it's like, you understand that Ducati and BMW have that on lock, and like you said, BMW will sell you a $6,000 entry level 310 GS if that's what you'd like. They'll give you that.
Yeah.
Harley Davidson doesn't have that. They have,
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it's
then
10.5 now.
they in what is it over in Europe? They do have that new single cylinder
Yeah,
for, but they're not going to bring it to the U.S.
right.
And then I don't know if this is the time to shift into it or not, but
Sure.
Livewire. I mean,
I've got stats for you.
this. All right, so I'm not anti battery power, but it's like, yeah, in America, you've got to be able to travel distances. Everything's spread out. All right. And if I'm going to spend $20,000, $30,000, I want to go more than 60 miles. And I don't see, so Asia, Europe, develop places out there, scooters,
Mhm.
in urban, I mean, heck, you can't go to any big city and see the little bird scooters everywhere that to
Yeah.
rent, just get, I mean, they serve a purpose, for urban commuting, but you're not going to urban commute on a 500, 600 pound live wire. You're going to
Well,
want a little put your leg through scooter. And I don't see the market in the US for that. And I don't see the market. And it's already, I mean, over here, people are buying, but they're buying like Sarons,
yeah.
or they're buying your battery electric e-assist mountain bikes, which are hugely popular.
We're talking orange and black, so I've got quite a few stats on both of
Yeah.
these.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I just listened to a podcast, Gypsy Tales podcast, with the owner of Stark Varg.
Yeah.
Phenomenal podcast.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's like, okay, for 10, 12, let's call it $13,000. I don't know what the price is, but it's in that range. You can buy a Stark Varg, which is a high performer,
Yes,
incredible bike, and
that's a
park.
badass bike.
Yeah, you park it next to a KTM 500 or a KTM 350 4-stroke, and you're not arguing about much. No, you're
Yeah.
nitpicking over
Yeah.
$1,000 at the most. Like, that's a killer bike. But you're right. On the street, we're having a whole other conversation. Like, you want me to spend $25,000 on an electric motorcycle when I can get a Ducati Panigale V4?
Yeah.
Like we're in the similar place here, and it's like the sex appeal of any performance Ducati BMW is dramatically better than the electric live wire. Here's an interesting thing, because you touched on all the points. So Livewire sold 613 bikes in 2024. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Harley Davidson sold, I don't know if I have the number in front of me, somewhere around to, what was it? It doesn't matter. I forget how many units they sold, but ultimately they told investors in 2022. There you go. I looked at a number similar to that. They told investors in 2022 they would sell between 750 to 2,000 live wire bikes, and didn't, obviously, by a large margin. Also, Stasic made up 66% of the live wire revenue. So the kids' bikes are the
Yes.
vast majority of the revenue that Livewire's generating. It's breathtaking. And also, I wanted to put in the footnote there that KTM borrowed $370 million to start an e-bike company to compete in this same space. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that both brands are trying to get kids on electric bikes, but I think they're either too early or they missed the boat, and the economy is headed the opposite direction, and people are selling those toys. If you want a Saran right now, they're on Marketplace. You can go get one because people bought them with their COVID money and they can't keep them.
Yes, and I think, and that brings up something really interesting is, and I was looking at your graph that you sent me that we shared earlier about, the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and um, you can see right when the COVID money hit.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's dried up. But here's the thing, this was interesting, and it may have been, well, not, you've probably seen the articles recent, but like Triumph, for example,
Yep.
their sales, eh, they're going up.
134,000 units this year. BMW did 210.
Yeah. So when people say, "Oh, the market's down," well, yeah, but why is BMW and Triumph succeeding? Maybe you don't have the product people want and at
Well,
the price people want.
it's fascinating to me because I have a lot of criticism of Triumph.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, they're copying huge portions of Harley Davidson's business model. They're now requiring dealers to have a lot of signage and dedicated floor space and all
Yeah.
the stuff that people claim they love about Harley, which is really expensive and killing their dealers. And Triumph is copying that, but they have the product mix right, that they're getting away with this premium thing for the most part. Now, I saw some massive discounts on Triumph Tigers this spring here up in Ohio. I think they were selling Tiger 900 rallies for 13,000, marked down from 17. They were like 13.5. So it's happening, but you're right. They still made record sales, right? We can't argue with that.
Yeah. But it's interesting. You're talking about Harley Davidson, so I'm at this age. I ride with younger riders and I ride with older riders, and a lot of these older riders that have switched over that were to the adventure segment, and they were always Harley riders. They got on Pan America. I even got a buddy of mine to buy one because he's a Harley rider,
Yep.
and he's not going to ever go off road, but he wanted a more of a touring type bike. He's thinking about going to Alaska on and so, more adventure style bike would make sense, and got him on a Pan America. But there, and I've test rode several times. It's a great bike. That motor, um, the motor is not your traditional Harley motor, but now it's going to be the Thai America. That has pissed off they're going to make it over in Thailand. The motor,
I didn't realize that. That doesn't
yeah,
surprise me, but I
no,
didn't realize that.
they have already built the plant. They're 2025 and 2026, they've moved that motor over there. They're not making it in the US anymore. That has ticked off. I've had just anecdotally what others owners have said are so mad about that they are going to stop, or they're selling their Pan America. They can't get any money for it. I mean, you know what they're
Yeah.
reselling for. They spent
Yeah.
20 grand and they're getting 8 grand a
Yeah.
couple of years later.
$13,000 is
Yeah.
very common list price for a Pan America with low miles on it right now.
Yeah. So, it's but yeah, it's going to be, so it's not going to be, they're naming it the Pan America, but it's not going to be made in America anymore. And I'm like, and I don't care where bikes are made, really, if it's a quality product, but it's again, know your market a little bit.
It Yeah, it's really fascinating because I actually think KTM and Harley Davidson are looking at similar fates. If let's pretend we stay in the global market that we're accustomed to, right?
Right.
Let's put aside tariffs and Trump and all the other stuff that
Yeah.
people are talking about. We have to pretend we're going to stay on the global trade road we're currently on, right? Americans have to cut costs because
Yeah.
manufacturing here has been traditionally so expensive. So it makes sense they outsource. But I think Germany's actually in a similar situation. They have a labor problem. There's a population issue there that the German, Austrian, European world didn't have nearly as many kids. The baby boomers didn't have as many kids as they did here.
Right.
We have a population problem, but it's further away. Theirs is
Right.
pretty imminent. So to some degree, companies like KTM, which they've already begun doing, right? Like they're manufacturing in China and India,
Mm-hmm.
but they're designing in Austria, and obviously they were still making some things there. And I think Harley Davidson is a similar situation. But you're right
Yeah.
that it's so much part of the identity that
Yeah, I mean and that's the thing. It's like I don't care where you make your bikes, but like if you're trying to sell your identity, like you're going to be this uber niche high. I mean, I'm not going to, with this identity, with everything, with the red, white, and blue, and the American flag, and some, with their marketing, right? Because it's all over their marketing, but and you tell your people that you're going to, and that was what pissed people off. They're like, oh, this is always going to be made in America. And it's like, well, it's not, which is fine if they want to make it over there. It's, I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. It's like, because how much of their merchandise, their image, right, is you're buying an image. You're not just buying a bike, you're buying a
right.
lifestyle. And so if it's, so, your lifestyle's not so,
It it's a good question, right? Like, in a perfect world, I want to say that Josen Zeitz is cutting the purse strings so they can invest in the right things instead of
yeah,
investing in everything, right? Which is, KTM did that, right? KTM invested in everything to include MotoGP racing, Dakar, the whole smash, right? Just burn
yes.
cash. So I would like to think that somewhere in there is an enthusiast in that he's just going to move it to Thailand and to some degree I hate to say it this way, but they're going to get a little divorced from the boomers, right? Because the boomers have controlled that brand heavily since at least
Yes.
1985, right? Like
Yeah.
they've owned it. So to your point, it's like, okay, millennials, I'm the oldest one I know. Like they don't care, right? But that is the issue, right? When BMW offers you a 310, so I'm a younger guy and I can get on this 310 and live and grow with the brand,
Yeah.
all that Harley sells is cruisers. And frankly, as a guy who has an old Sportster in his garage, those new Sportsters are fugly. I can't say it any
Well,
nicer,
and
man.
I mean, I'm partial to old school FXRs. I love those
Yeah,
bikes. They're classics,
yeah,
and I would like, but I love the sporties. There's a market for that, but it's niche, and
yeah.
I'll tell you a comparison too with the problems with being an ultra. You're talking about we've already got a Ducati out there. It's so in other so I'm a photographer and I'm also a big watch enthusiast. And so in the photography world, you have Leica, and so Leica, um, they have always been a rangefinder camera. They've dipped their toes in SLRs, but rangefinders went out of date in the 1950s, about the time Harley Davidson V twins went out of date. I mean, for real, and so they continued to lose market share and teetered on bankruptcy and been bought and sold many times. And they finally found their place. Instead of trying to sell lots of cameras, it's now the Rolex of the camera world. And if you really want to strut your stuff, and I own, and they're not new ones or old ones, but I own
Right.
four of them. So, I follow this category. I love them. They're great cameras, but it's old technology. No, it's not the latest and greatest. And what they're selling now is not, they know it's not the latest and greatest. You're buying into a lifestyle
Yeah.
and they don't sell many. I mean, there are in the single thousands, like not many of the cameras. And so it's like, and then, so you're not going, it's like, well, if Harley wants to go that way, it's going to make investors happy. I mean,
It, that's my question. And I've said that for a long time, especially when it was becoming obvious that it almost looked like they were going to position the company for purchase. That it's like I remember before Polaris bought Indian because that's who they were, right?
yeah,
And because it had been bought and sold and there was like very little heritage left, like nobody bought it. So Polaris bought it and it's like let's go head to head with Harley Davidson, and they made it work. But nobody really did before that. And that's my concern is like how do you go from being 51% of the market over what 750 cc's or whatever that metric is that Harley Davidson was to, one of the largest brands in America to deciding we just want to be a topic on the bookshelf over here. Like I don't understand how anyone does that and sees that as a successful place to become, like you said, the Rolex of motorcycles for investors. I don't
yeah.
I don't understand that strategy at all. Maybe it plays out, but maybe I'm young and dumb. But to me, the biggest issue is I see Xers totally thinking that the Dyna was like the bike, right? Like you see all the
Hmm.
Gen X guys on Dyna stunt bikes and this, that, and the other. And I'm watching them lot of it because I'm so close to them too, that it's like they're into the street glides now. Things are relaxing and stuff like that. Like I see that, but I don't see the Xers deciding that what I'm going to get every CVO that comes out and all the other ultra premium stuff that they're trying to push, and they're not offering anything for the young people. I do see some millennials and people younger than me getting on the older Sportsters and stuff, but I don't know. It could be overshadowed by my bias. I just don't see younger people getting as interested in the cruiser market, considering how much more interesting the rest of the market is right now.
Well, you're hitting on the point, and very important point. So long term, they're pigeonholing themselves. Eventually, they're gonna have to get rid of Livewire. It's not. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that's a big big money drain, and I can't believe they're still holding on to it. I'm surprised. I mean, I would. You would think if there's any smarts, I bet they dump it this year, but who knows? They if they try to hold on to it, we know that the government money train on that, is
Yeah.
gone, right? That all changed a month
Even the
ago.
car markets are running from it
Yeah,
now.
I mean, it was like, great, we'll build these EV, keep giving us money. That's gone.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ford's getting out of, and I think that's reached, the people that were going to buy them have bought them, whatever it is, whether it's like the Surons or that. I mean, there's a market, the Start Vargs, and it's a very niche. And I think they're going to do great with it because people that are, I mean, they have a limited range, but they are super good. Endurocross, that's going to be a
Yeah.
killer. But I mean, it's already showing. It's like, it'll wipe the floor with all the competition.
You said it's in context, right? But I think the biggest issue with Harley Davidson getting involved in electric is like your primary market, unless we want to talk about bar hopping, is antithetical to what batteries are good at. I wrote a big article about this that
Yes.
it's like if you want to enduro race and do off road and all this other stuff, especially if you live in the city like I do, man, electric has some major advantages,
Yeah.
torque, all that stuff. But distance is never going to be an advantage for electric over combustion engines.
Never.
So
And
why are you trying to compete in that realm? It doesn't make sense.
yeah, it's and I'm and I won't even get it, all the arguments about, well, in 5 years the battery. No, it won't. No, it won't. And it's not. I mean, it's never going to be. And so it's you can't put a square peg in a round hole. It's just not going to fit.
It,
And so
it,
it's in certain niche applications, urban commuting, fantastic, but you got to have the right bike for that. You don't need a 600 pound, whatever they call theirs. I forget their names of it. They have about three different names, Mulholland and,
no,
Livewire Mulholland and
no
whatever.
idea.
Nobody's going to want that to cruise around the city on they're going to want a scooter or a moped or something like that. A young person that didn't have to pay more than a couple of grand, or they're going to get on their little
It,
B scooter,
that's it.
or one wheel or something.
You're competing in the urban street market, and you're
Yeah,
competing against a lot of sport bikes that have plenty of juice for
yeah,
a lot less money. It just doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
yeah. So that's Harley. KTM. Now this is interesting. Um, I can't believe they bought MV Augusta a year ago, and they already knew. I mean, like
Yeah, the writing
a
was on the
lot of
wall.
people, I already saw, and I know you already saw it. We're always like, they're already hemorrhaging money, and we're like, and I was like, when they bought it, and I was like, this ain't gonna. What are they doing with this? You know,
It,
and
I think, like I said before, and I don't know as much in this realm, but I think because of the enthusiast mentality that it was just like all this stuff is here for the taking, and it seems like we can get money for this, and we've had the growth for this, so it's like just spend the money, and it's breathtaking to think that that was the case. And if you wanted to say that they were trying to pivot a street brand based on their MotoGP team, and I'm making all this up, right? Like I would buy that, but I've made the argument already that Husqvarna is actually the correct company to use because Husqvarna
yeah,
has a legitimate premier class motorcycle GP heritage that exists from like the 1930s. So why did you need MV Augusta to do this? Other than
yeah.
they wanted to bring in the design, maybe they wanted to buy some of the intellectual property, the kind of the way that technically Harley Davidson kind of did with Alta. Maybe they didn't. We don't know for sure, but
Oh, that was
I
some,
don't
and Alto was a good. I
right.
mean, I remember they competed at Erzberg or was going to. I think their bike got stolen or something happened, but I remember. And then they just disappeared, and we know
Yeah.
Harley killed that.
Well, I think some of us think that. I'm not gonna,
Well,
stand firm
maybe
on that,
not.
but I'm like, I got questions about
Okay.
what happened there because it's a little weird. So, and that's the question, right? It's like, yeah, what was the whole thing with MV Augusta, or was there going to be they're going to let do something different with Husqvarna? But to me, ultimately, the biggest issue with after that is the fact that there's like zero brand differentiation, despite
Well, and that
words
was, it's
lip
like, are you gonna
service.
have a red KTM, an orange KTM, or a white KTM? And it just reminded me, and I was always baffled by that because I mean, that was right in that generation, the 80s and 90s, when Chevrolet, Buick, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, it
Yes,
was the exact same car with a different badge on it. And it's
yeah,
like, I mean, it's like, what are you doing? And it's the same platform. Everything was the same, just different graphics, bold new graphics. And on the cars, there's different hubcaps and paint scheme and, different seat covers. But I mean, that,
it,
and so what was different? It's like, do we need to have three of each? And like, so to go to your point about Husqvarna and MotoGP, it's like, why didn't they have one of those as your street bike, one of them as your off-road? And, I mean, Gas was traditionally a trials, I
right.
mean,
It,
keep
I
that
mean,
platform.
I did. I did an entire blog post and an episode about this exact topic. Actually, I've got big plans for KTM when I'm dictator for life, right?
I read a lot of your stuff on there. So yeah.
Because that's the thing, right? It's like I like Gas. I knew who they were before they bought them. Obviously, I think anyone who's ever owned a chainsaw recognizes Husqvarna, but I didn't know much about their race stuff. I'm going to pivot slightly as I'm getting distracted in my mind, but
Sure.
it's kind of funny to think about BMW may potentially buy KTM because it's like, wait a minute, didn't they just used to own Husqvarna like 5 seconds
Well,
ago?
yeah, that exactly. That was humorous,
So I was like, wait a minute, this come full circle here. But
which is now what they owned is SWM, right?
right, no,
Yeah,
100% right.
yeah,
Gas and Raiju and the whole thing. And truthfully, I think having the same power plant, having good engineers design good, reliable power plants, especially in the dirt department, like thank God KTM has almost single-handedly saved the two-stroke. Like I'm
oh,
very
for
happy about
sure.
that, right? So in that realm, I think it's awesome. but beyond that, you have to have some kind of brand differentiation. Because if we look in the car market, there's cars on the road today that are like joint engine developments between multiple companies
Yeah.
that are technically competing, right? So like, I'm totally okay with that. None of us care what's
Yeah.
under the hood as long as it runs and it's fun. But on the outside, it is like, yeah, like, why isn't Gas the brand that makes, motorcycles that you can throw off a cliff and it doesn't care? KTM makes the race bike that you're going to win on, and Husqvarna makes the most rad street bikes, with
And
attitude,
it can
right?
be
Like
the
something
same
like that.
base engine across
Yeah.
platforms. That is no big deal, right? You know.
No,
And so what you and about saving the two strokes, you know, it did. And what's even more interesting is I'm already seeing the vacuum that's being created by the uncertainty. I mean, look at Kawasaki just announced that they're
yeah,
going to be back in the two-stroke market, and Yamaha is now sponsoring Cody Webb and giving
I
him
was right
free
to say.
reign on that.
Yeah.
And so I really see him as kind of the beta tester. I mean, if you I've been watching a lot of his stuff,
Yep.
and so they're giving him free reign to do what he wants to with the motor, and I think they're going to at some point get some pertinent ideas of how they can tweak the 250 their 250X into something with e-start and maybe some different gearing, a WR 250X.
Yeah, so we should think about this in the context of history, right? And I'm not a big motocross guy, so I know people listening who know motocross could probably point out dates, but it's like, yeah, the Japanese eventually came on the scene. We know the street bike history, and we know how it relates to Harley. Speaking of 1985,
Yes, yes.
um, but the Japanese just started dominating with four strokes and motocross and all this other stuff. And somewhere along the line, KTM was taking a whipping, but just kept developing and kept grinding away. And then before long, it's like, yeah, if you were serious about racing or you were really into off road, like KTM was a great choice because it was a good bike. After 2012, especially, it was very reliable. You could still get a two stroke. They were developing the two stroke and all that other stuff. And somewhere they kind of got nuts. And like you said, they blinked. And Yamaha has been, frankly, eating everybody's lunch, in my opinion, in pretty much every segment. They've managed to, I never thought about that. They're the Toyota of the motorcycle world
Yeah,
right now, where they have roughly the right mix of both products and inventory, that they're not doing the wild stuff.
yeah.
So no, I just think we need to think about that. Remember this moment as Harley Davidson and KTM are struggling, and then how some of these Japanese brands, who frankly have been kind of sitting on their hands for a while,
Well,
are
they have
finally, yeah, finally
for
deciding to
sure.
do
I mean, they have for a
something.
long time, and but there's some opportunities. I think they're seeing a little inroad there. So interesting thing though about this. So Kawasaki, of course, and the Japanese, I mean, that whole business culture is so closely,
Oh
and they
yeah,
have, and so it's a whole different world than the rest of the world over there. But
absolutely.
Kawasaki got spun off because they build like ships and all sorts of stuff. But they spun off the motorsports division. I think was it 2 years ago? Sometime during COVID, they spun that off, and
Okay.
so the whole thing with that is like kind of the sink or swim. But I'm wondering, since they spun it off, they're having a little bit more flexibility to think, maybe we can get back into two strokes again. Where the bigger ones, Yamaha, I mean, even though they're looking at this, that two stroke, it's the same engine since 1999. I mean,
yeah.
really unchanged. The bike unchanged since '99. I think the engine is older than that, but um, the Tenere, which is such, and you own one now, and I own one. That motor, and that was the big reason I bought it. One of the big reasons was the motor had been around for so long, the CP2, that it's one of the most reliable motors in the industry. And I just, and I ride a lot, so I wanted something to fit.
It,
But
I mean, it's interesting that you say that as it relates to other things, because it's all related to this topic. The Tenere 700 is a adventure bike built around a street bike,
yep.
and it obviously was the FZ07 for a long time before it was
Hmm.
the Tenere that we have today. And it's funny to me that when you look at the competitors of KTM and Harley Davidson, KTM's 890 is a beast. Like, it's a phenomenal bike.
Hmm.
However, it is plagued with some electrical problems
Yep.
and definitely the engine camshaft thing that we all know.
Oh
But it's
yeah.
interesting to me is we've known about that it has some immobilizer stuff and some other strange electrical, we'll call them just quirks, if not necessarily problems. And the Harley Davidson Pan America has the exact same thing. They have a bunch of weird electrical gremlins that go on in that bike as well. And it's one of those things like, what's the Tenere? Well, the one that I have, the last, doesn't have any of that shit, like
No.
ABS and nothing else.
Yeah, and
It's
that's
wild.
mine. The 23 years is what, 24.
No, it's a 23 as well. It was a
Okay.
leftover. I bought
Well,
on
mine's
discount
been
for that
sitting.
reason.
I'll tell you, there's a downside to this. So mine's been sitting at a Yamaha dealer since no, mid-November, and it was from well, I don't think they're going to be watching this podcast, but hey, I did a little submarine on the front end of it,
Yeah.
and it fried out my display, which I didn't
Yeah.
care because I mean it's like I run a GPS unit, so I can see speed on that. It didn't bother me at the time. It's like I'll deal with it later, and and then my headlight had water in it, and it eventually fried all that out.
Yeah.
So I took it to the deal. I had the extended warranty. I was like, I don't know. They got some water in there somehow, rain,
Bikes get wet.
Yeah, I was supposed to get wet, and so Yamaha has agreed to pay for it. The problem is, so I just got the phone. Everything works. They're not keeping any parts. So the
Yeah.
assembly, I got a phone call that they're going to ship it. Yamaha's going to ship it on January 29th. Well, now we're in March. And so I called
Right.
the other day and they're like, well, and I was like, they pushed back the shipping date to March 29th. I'm like, crap.
Yep.
And basically he said they're having to wait for the manufacturer, whoever Yamaha
Right.
contracts with, to actually build some. They haven't been building any because they haven't needed to.
Well, and it's I mean, that's why it's funny because the episode really kind of started with economics to some degree, right? We were talking
Yeah,
about stocks, and most of us really don't care about that normally. It was only relevant because it's the guy was fired because of that, right?
yeah,
But it's related to all this, like you said. It's during COVID, it was like they couldn't build bikes fast enough. KTM kept their foot pedal on the gas pedal, or sorry, foot
oh
on the
yeah,
gas pedal, obviously. And was it for the previous conversation? They've got like 250,000 units or something like that for 2024 unsold. So they have more bikes from 2024 not sold globally than Triumph sold. Anyway, side comment, right? Um, but now I think the Japanese, especially, like I said, if you look at Honda and you look at Toyota and the car market, they've really been keeping a tight grip on supply. They
yeah,
know the economy is headed in the toilet. So you're right, as bike consumers, we're kind of screwed because there's no
yeah,
doubt that suppliers are being choked right now because they recognize the
yeah.
writing on the wall that they've got until the bikes that they have an inventory and backlog are sold, that they're not real anxious to fire up any engines anywhere.
So the other bike, so I have been riding is a WR 250F, and it's an
Mhm.
old one. It's an '05. And so I have no idea when the last time the valves were checked. Not by me. I don't know if the top end's ever, it doesn't look like it's ever been opened up. No telling how many hours, and it's a 250,
Yeah.
but I keep wondering, I'm like, I'm going to have to do a valve check. But, tradition, I go down there. It doesn't matter if it's been sitting for a month in the cold.
Right.
Just touch the starter, boom, fires right up. I'm like, dang. And it's like, if it's not broke, why fix it? Traditionally, your valves start getting tight, it gets hard to crank.
Yep.
But so my plan is when I get the Tenere back to, get the valves adjusted. But they probably won't even need to. But I'm like, this is an '05, and it's not. I mean, it's still. I'm not having to do anything to it.
Yeah, it's it's kind
So
of fascinating. Maybe we'll have to have people start to write this down, right? Like Harley Davidson has had that reputation for being unreliable. That up until about 3 years ago, I would have told you don't know what you're talking about, because the Evo engine that's in the sports store I have is virtually unkillable. Like
yes, they're
everyone has done
fantastic.
everything to that. Like
Yeah.
the oil spill crap is pre-Evo. Like they were talking about old iron heads and stuff, right? What AMF years or whatever you want to
Yep.
call it.
Yep.
But that's the thing now, right? Is the Pan America, and you know what? I wish I had stats in front of me because they release the recall stats every now and then. but cars, motorcycles, everything right now, all of the
Mm,
COVID era electric stuff is all suspect. This is my opinion, but it's like there's been a lot of
yeah.
recalls about dumb shit. Harley saying that you got to bring in your Street Glide because the Batwing may pinch a wire somewhere. I'm
Well,
forgetting who what
Honda is having
is that
just
what it is?
announced recalls on their CBR 600s.
Is that right?
Yeah, I just saw that today, this morning. And so, so yeah, to your point, I think everybody, all the COVID, there was some definite issues going on during that time.
But my only post is the Harley Davidson, hopefully, and I'm curious where it's at with the touring bikes and the bigger stuff, right? But it's like they've just been packing electronics and all these things and calling it premium, and all the brands are somewhat guilty of it. And I'm like, are we really going to feel that way? And about 2 or 3 more years, especially when, like you said, if we're having a hard time getting parts for some of this stuff, is that still going to be the way that we
Yeah.
feel?
So
Go ahead.
no, no. I mean, that's the thing. I don't feel so when I had the 1090, um, never had any problems with it. But I will tell you, I did. I carried a fuel injector,
Mm-hmm.
with me, a fuel pump with me at all times
Yeah.
because that's a known fail point on all KTM's really. But
I've replaced one on my 350, as a matter of fact.
yeah,
Funny you mentioned that.
and I did an iron butt. I mean, I went across the country and back, but I didn't feel. I was always worried: is the bike going to do? And it performed flawlessly. I was cruising 90 miles an hour in the dead heat of summer, and it didn't skip a beat. But I didn't feel safe. Like I knew, like, well, I could get stranded on the side of the road and have to replace the fuel pump, or I could have something prop up, and maintenance schedules were really expensive and more
Yeah.
frequent. And the Tenere, even though I told you it's in the shop, it's not the motor. And,
Right.
it's a headlight that I fried out. I did that. Yamaha, I hope you don't listen to this. I'm not paying for this.
Yeah, as long as you
But,
don't, as a guy with a British bike who's had some of these issues before, it's
yeah,
usually as long
yeah.
as the rest of the main bundle's fine,
But
it
I
might be
don't
all
have
right.
to worry. I'm like, I don't ever worry, that it's not going to get me there. And well, same with like Suzuki. Like when I
Yeah.
did the little bloop bloop submarine on it, joined Team Bloop Bloop with it. The other bike with me was a Suzuki 800 DE, one of the new ones, and
Oh
they
yeah.
did sink it and got mud in the motor.
Oh
And
Lord.
sure enough, but here's the thing. We drained the pulled the plugs, drained the oil
Yeah.
out. It fired right up. And of course, there was a milkshake. The guy, and changed the oil out 2 or 3 times. I got home. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, there's something to be said about some of those.
It, I mean, as we, you know, move toward the back end of the episode, I
Yeah.
think of myself like I'm excited for KTM's future. I think the cam situation and how they were kind of not really wanting to take care of that is a serious issue for them and has made everything worse. If they didn't have to fight that, I think they'd be in a better
Yeah.
space because they don't have to fix the reputation problem and the money problem. To some degree, BMW buying them, if that's the way that plays out, if they handle it right, if they let KTM be who they are but not be financially irresponsible, hopefully we can continue to have Dakar Rally news and 890 rally bikes and all that other stuff. I hope we get to keep that stuff because KTM has a brand identity, and I don't think they have a customer base brand identity problem. They may have a reliability problem, and nobody, frankly, is better than handling that than BMW because the whole drive shaft issue. Like they have a ton
Yeah.
of experience on how to turn a negative into a positive. They're very good at that. On the flip side, Harley Davidson, who is actually, I had some stats here, and they're not important, but they lost a shit ton of money late last year. Like they're millions of dollars behind on operating
Yeah.
income last year. They have the opposite problem where they're running out of enthusiasm, and I don't think that they have a diverse customer base, and I think they're going to struggle to redefine themselves to the younger generation. That's one of my bigger concerns. You got some big money lost in there. Was it $117 million? Is that what that is?
There's some big ones, and it was, yeah, they're consolidated losses,
Yeah,
big,
I had
big.
$214 million in operating loss for
Yeah.
Q4 2024 written on here. They sold 53% fewer units in Q4 24 versus Q4 23. Excuse me. Yeah, operating income is down 58% year over year. So it's like I think, you know, a lot of people that are in the adventure space probably aren't paying that close of attention, but I'm like, no, Harley Davidson, I think, is presently not in a good space. And I think it's like I said, to me, I just don't think that they're going to find as many new customers. I know people have been saying that for a long time, but I'm like, I think that day is now.
Yeah. Well, so I think you're spot on with this is so whatever happens to KTM, they're even if they have to go back to their core, their dirt bikes are phenomenal,
Right.
right? And that's been their core for a lot long, and that's not going to go away. Is even though Kawasaki says they're going to come out with another two-stroke, Yamaha has one that's still kickstart. People like the magic button. I mean, if you want a two-stroke, you're buying a KTM. Well, and there's some other options, Reiju, TM,
Beta makes a good two stroke.
beta,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think, but I mean, you don't have as many options out there, um, so I think they're in a better position over Bosm, at least for their core market, than Harley's. Just like they're easing out that I mean, core market is aging out and dying, and they're getting more and more niche, and it's such a big company that I don't think they can afford to be that niche.
It,
Smaller company can,
but I mean, it's an entire other podcast.
yes.
And we talk about generations, but I think it's important for people to understand how identity changes with generation. I do think that boomers traditionally treated Harley Davidson as an expression of themselves to project to the outer world.
Hmm.
I think Generation X adopted part of that, and it's also kind of a like, screw you, I don't care. But I think millennials and especially Zoomers are going to be dramatically more pragmatic than the previous generations are. I mean, I could go on forever about the bikes I've bought and how little I've paid and buying used and all this other stuff. And it's like, I just don't see the younger generations clamoring for high priced Harleys. They have to be more pragmatic than they are.
Yeah.
I could be
Yeah.
100% wrong, but I'm pretty firm
No,
on this.
you're right. And the and the whole adventure segment too. And I'll kind of we can kind of end on this a little bit because KTM lost a buyer when I was looking for a brand new bike. It was really between the 890 and the Tenere. And the 890 is arguably is a better performing
Mm-hmm.
adventure bike, but the cheese cams, the reliability
Yeah.
issues were already known, and that was in 23. So we already knew about that, and then it just got worse. It really exploded last year in 24 with everybody knowing what was going on because a lot of people were denying it and like, oh, that's rare. No, it wasn't rare. It's widespread. It was a design issue, but. But with that, about the adventure bikes, right? So in the four wheel in the cage world, overlanding is huge. Van
Yep.
life, Jeeps. People want to get is, and that really sprung up. I mean, it was already happening, but I think COVID excelled.
Yeah.
Really excelled that as people want to get off the beaten path. And if you're on two wheels, you have to with an adventure bike. There's not the appeal for a big cruiser,
Yep.
that there was, and that's when we know that the adventure bike is. I mean, that is a growth segment of
Mm-hmm.
motorcycling across the industry. So,
I think the industry would be wise to pay attention to that. I'm a walking, talking example of all of this, right? I had a
yeah.
cruiser first. I was totally on the street only first. And now I want to get away from that. I was also a kid who grew up at, 1987. I had a computer in my house, right? Like I'm exposed to all that. The
Yeah.
motorcycle industry has been throwing all this tech at the bikes. And I think that they're missing the boat that people want to be more in touch with nature while on motorcycles.
Oh
the
yeah.
the tech to me is not value added when you come down the generational and price income ranking, like this tech is not relevant to this experience.
Well, and yeah, and so I'm a same example. I mean, I started, when I got back into riding, rode some in college, but when I got back into riding about 2010, it was with a Goldwing
Yeah.
and a bagger, a big, and then I was going to move into the Harley world. I was kind of inching that way, but then the adventure, as I started reading some adventure stories on Adventure Rider, and
Yeah.
that more appealed to what I do because I was in my truck exploring back roads in my truck long before I did it and that I ended up doing a title swap for KLR 650 because
Yeah.
I think not everybody's, but that's like the
It's a
beginner into adventure world. It's like,
gateway
which way am
motorcycle.
I going to go? I don't know. I'll get a KLR,
Yeah.
and then so now I mean I'm shopping this week for another adventure bike for my wife.
Yeah.
Adventure bike. Is that's what. So it's and it won't be KTM. It will probably be a Kawasaki.
Well, again, another podcast at this point,
Yeah,
but KTM 390 Adventure coming from Bajaj. I
yeah,
mean, if they can get their finances in order and cut the silly stuff, that 390 could change everything. I'm
yeah.
super pumped for that. Even the 390 Enduro, $5,500. That's a killer bike.
Well, I'm looking at a Versus X300
Mhm.
because more street. I'm looking more street
Oh,
biased
I didn't mean
because
for you. I meant
yeah.
for
Well, I know.
KTM, but
Yeah,
no,
no, no,
100%.
but no, you're right. That 390 Adventure R I think will tick a lot of boxes for a lot of people.
Yep.
But it's funny how these things happen. The Versus X300 kind of owned that segment for a while, and now there's a lot of competition
Yep.
coming back into that, which has
Yep.
brought me like I didn't even look at it 5 years ago. I would have been like X300, who cares about it? Now I'm going back like maybe they had something right there.
And if you're not rushing too much, there's supposedly a KLE on the
The
horizon.
500,
Well, that's the
yeah.
question is it another 500 or is it going to be a 650? Good question.
Well, who knows? And is it, there's a lot of talk on that. But yes, that's a whole nother podcast. But anyways, Drew, I know I've taken up your time. I appreciate you talking about this because I've been wanting to kind of shoot the breeze on this. And I hope to see if I don't see you sooner rather than later, but I will see you at your event at Red River Scramble and just kind of let everybody know and you're welcome to come to it. We have a free meetup. So you inspired us. Uh,
Good.
so we moved from our Eastern rendezvous. We're going to have a Central rendezvous first weekend in May. You can go to our website, letstakearide.com, or on our Facebook page, and let's take a ride for event detail. But it's free. It's over in Midwest Tennessee, going out of Bucks Ranch, which is a private campground. They're going to open up for us,
Good.
but it's a free ride. You just have to, if you bring your RV, you have to pay for hookups. Camping is cheap, but yeah, it's a free ride, 2 day ride. We're going to have a poker run and a ram rally. If anybody's not familiar with ram rally, check out one of our podcasts from last season where we talk about that because the person we interviewed is going to be putting this ram rally on.
Sweet.
So anyways, you're welcome to come if you want to come down ride in Tennessee first weekend of May.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Well, it'd be perfect for the Tenere or the Scrambler.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All machines work.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Have a great evening.
Cheers, man. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
See ya.